Such an excitement to be here. You know, I was thinking about what brought about my being here with you guys today, and really came with two reasons why I'm here: amazing people and bold prayers. And it really starts with two amazing people that I came into relationship with, and actually, they've been in relationship with Destiny Rescue for longer than I've been in relationship with Destiny Rescue, and that's Wayne and Cecilia Hostetler. We got to meet. I come to New Jersey a few times a year, and I was coming, and I'm like, let's see if we have supporters in New Jersey, other supporters that I didn't know about, and reached out to Wayne and Cecilia, said, hey, would you guys have dinner with me? And so we went to the Chit Chat Diner, and we spent, I think, a couple of hours there, and we had a great conversation that led into, I think, a great start of a friendship. And what I learned of them is I think you have learned of them through the years as well, is that they are amazing people. But then also the other reason was bold prayers. And the bold prayers were the bold prayers of your pastor. Pastor Andy, when I met him for the first time, he said to me that Destiny Rescue was an answer to his prayers. And the reality is you are an answer to our prayers. And so to have that moment, to know that your pastor was saying that I'm looking for an organization to partner with to help rescue kids. That's a bold prayer, because too many people, too many even pastors will shy away from this darkness, but not your pastor. No, your pastor, yeah. Your pastor boldly walked straight into this and said, we at Crossroads, we are going to be a part of rescue. We're going to say yes to rescue. So today we're going to rescue children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking, and we're going to equip them to stay free. That's what we're going to do today. Why? Because of some amazing people and some bold prayers. In fact, every child rescued involves amazing people and bold prayers. What you may not know is our founder, Tony Kerwin, he went to Thailand for vacation. And while he was there, he did go and see what was happening to children in the red light district area, and he prayed this one sentence: someone should do something. God responded with a question: why not you? And so you know what Tony did? He went home. He sold his business and moved his entire family to Thailand, and he founded Destiny Rescue. And so from the first 10 years, from 2001 to 2011, we learned and we studied rescue work. And in the midst of studying rescue work, we were part of prevention work on the prevention side of rescuing kids. And then in 2011, Tony had a dream or a vision from God. He believes that God had challenged him and challenged Destiny Rescue to rescue 100,000 people. And I'm excited to show you, if I do this right, there we go. I should probably point that way, not to the TV. This bar graph shows you from that moment when Tony had that prayer, had that moment, had that vision from God in 2011 to the end of 2024. And you can see what we believe is God's favor on Destiny Rescue through the years. You can see the exponential increase in rescue, and then you see this little blimp there. Something happened in 2020. Can't remember exactly what happened. Small little pandemic or something like that. But other than that, you see this increase that happens. And so you see in 2024, we rescued 4,177 people. I want to tell you, by the end of September into early October this year, we've already rescued over 4,200 people. So again, it's amazing to see what's going on through Destiny Rescue. It's amazing to see. And in fact, you see that number says plus 21,000 plus. The number is now 23,000 plus. And so we're excited to see what God is doing. We're excited to the fact that we have the favor of God. But even though we have the favor of God, there's still a reality that over 1 million children are victims of sexual exploitation today. They're still victims today. They're still being dealt with. Human trafficking is one of the fastest crime industries in the world, fastest growing crime industries in the world. So what does Destiny Rescue do? Well, we do what I've already said. We help rescue kids, rescue children. That's our focus. Help rescue children from sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And we equip them to stay free. Our end goal is not rescue. Our end goal is her freedom. Right now, it is 9:38 a.m., unless, of course, you don't do daylight savings. But it's 9:38 a.m. right here, and in Thailand it's 9:38 p.m. And there are girls that are having to use their bed for something other than sleep. That's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like these girls that were right here worshiping with us. They were greeting when you came through the door. They're supposed to be living a life of freedom, not a life of exploitation, not a life of trafficking. So our vision is very simply to play a leading role in ending the exploitation and trafficking of children in our lifetime. And just real quickly, just to take you through a few important details about Destiny Rescue, these are the areas of the world where we rescue. We rescue in 5 regions in the world: Latin America, 2 regions in Africa, and 2 regions in Asia. To answer the quick question, I'll do it very quick for you. What about the United States? Well, whenever the government has asked for Destiny Rescue's help, we've said yes. That's the simplest answer. And our founder, Tony, wanted us to go to the places that lack resources and lack 911 and become the resources and become 911. When nearly 60% of all trafficking happens in Asia, then you can see where our focus is, where our focus is. And not just where we work, but how we work. Our primary ways of rescue, these are our 3 primary ways of rescue, which would be raids, which would be covert work, and which would be border rescues. Saturday, I will deep dive with you after the Operation Goldilocks documentary screening. By the way, I've watched it a few times. The individual who's the major person who plays a role in the rescues that are happening there, I not meet him one-on-one, but I've been able to meet him on a Zoom. And so we'll be able to deep dive in a whole lot more than what we can here this morning. But to take you real quickly through this, the idea of a border rescue, we have roughly 20 checkpoints along the border of Nepal. Again, we don't really like to say the number because there's some shifting that happens every so often, but we simply have border stations along the border of Nepal where our female rescue agents have the authority to stop anyone at the border, check their story, check their citizen papers, make sure everything is legitimate. If it's not, they can also call mom and dad, say, do you know that your daughter or your son are trying to cross the border, and they can stop the trafficking from ever even happening. So we call that border trafficking because we don't know what they would have gone into, and so we can rescue them. In the pursuit of rescuing children, especially in Nepal, in the pursuit of rescuing children, we do rescue young adults and adults as well. And then in covert work can often look like all different things. Going into a neighborhood, building rapport, finding the community leaders, asking them where are the girls that are being exploited, and then being able to offer them freedom, and they bravely say yes to rescue. Or it's going into those bars, those brothels, those gardens, and we'll be undercover in that situation. We'll actually go and talk with those girls, get their stories. Sometimes we'll have undercover, cameras on, and so that we can check that information, then get that information to the authorities, and then come back to that same location, and the authorities can arrest the traffickers. We can shut down the operation and rescue those girls. Raids are sometimes like that as well, but other times would be where we go to a location like in the Dominican Republic. There was a location where we rescued one girl, found out there was a whole network taking place, and we were able to simultaneously raid 14 different locations, rescue another 45 girls, and arrest every trafficker. Well, we didn't do the arresting, but the authorities did that. And so you can see that's kind of the operations. That's some of the details to let you know about Destiny Rescue at this point. In September, I actually was in Africa, and I got to meet so many of my teammates and many of our survivors. And one of those survivors that I got to meet was this young lady right here. Her name is G. And so I'm going to tell you about G along the way, as we will also talk about another woman in the Bible. But to get you started about G, this is not just G in Kenya. This is G in where she lives. This is Kiambu. Kiambu is the one of, if not largest, slum in the world in Nairobi. And the pictures on either side of her are part of her community, part of her neighborhood. And we are actually right there where she's going to head home after we had got the chance to hang out with her and talk with her and pray with her. And so I want to tell you about G for a second. She grew up in that slum. She grew up in Kiambu. And when you live there, it's survival. And survival means learning to be tough at a very young age. G's father actually passed away when she was young, and when she was still a child, and her mom now became a single mom and struggled to try to make sure that her family and G and her siblings were cared for. So what happened in that process of continued hardship and continued struggle, her mom no longer could afford the school fees when G got into secondary school. That's 8th grade. In Kenya, 8th grade is when school no longer is free, and you must have to pay for it at that point for sure. And so because of no longer being able to pay for it, she had to drop out of school. And so what G did, to hoping for stability, she moved in with her older sister. They struggled to support their family through casual jobs, but the weight of poverty and the pressure to provide for her family drew G into a company of 3 girls. And those girls introduced her into sex work. The little she earned came at the cost of her dignity, her safety, and her future. Now, when I think of G and her story, I think, what if some religious people had caught her in the act of doing what she did daily? Yes, she did what she did just to survive. But this question makes my mind shift to an encounter that Jesus had with a woman, and Jesus had with some religious leaders who did catch this woman in an act that we would call immoral. And we find it in John chapter 8. In John chapter 8, starting with verses 1 through 3 is where I'll go. And we'll stay in John 8 for the most part here today. And let's read it together. Jesus returned to the Mount, not out loud, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives. But early the next morning, he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. My first question to us is, was this woman a random person that the Pharisees found? Was this a random person they just caught in the act that night before? Or was it someone they knew they could catch in the act because of her profession or because of her situation? I don't know about you, but for me, I always had that tendency to assume this woman was a prostitute. But she could have been anyone. She even could have been someone like G. And so as we realize that, we step into the next verses. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? Now, before we get to what Jesus does say, let's see what the law of Moses does say. Let's see what the law of Moses. I got 3 different verses to show you that connect to what she was doing. And so we first find Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22. And it says, if a man is discovered committing adultery, both he and the woman must die. In this way you will purge Israel of such evil. Deuteronomy 13:9. You must put them to death. Strike the first blow yourself. That would be the accusers. The accusers strike the first blow. Then all the people must join in. And then verse 7 of chapter 17. The witnesses must throw the first stones, and then all the people may join in. In this way, you will purge the evil from among you. So my first question here is, where's the man? Where's the man in this situation? She was caught in the act of committing adultery, right? That means both her and the man she was with were caught in the act. These leaders were cold-hearted. These leaders were callous. These leaders were using this woman to get to Jesus. These leaders were treating her in a demeaning way. They were exploiting her simply to try and trap Jesus and to use her for their own purposes. One commentary on this passage says, her humiliation and fear would have been incredible. For G, things got even more complicated. And I think that her fear would have been incredible, like this woman that Jesus was encountering. Because you see, during the time when she was trying to survive through sexual exploitation, she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby boy. Now her struggles are magnified, right? Her struggles are no longer just her struggles, and she's no longer just trying to survive herself. No longer is she just trying to help her mom and her siblings eat. Now she has her own son to be able to eat. And I know some of that pressure of being able to feed my girls. There was a window of time in my life where we were on what would be called SNAP. I understand that struggle, and I know that I do everything I can to make sure that my kids are okay, my kids are safe. I love that, Pastor Andy, you shared the idea that, hey, if you're struggling right now, and it's partly because of the things that have happened with the government shutdown, hey, Crossroads is here to help you. I love that. That is a beautiful thing to see, that the church stepping out to say yes to help. But G was in that place where she's struggling, and now, because abandoned and overwhelmed, she's longing for a different life. One where she could provide for her child and for herself with dignity and hope. G felt trapped. In the biblical encounter, we see the Pharisees were hoping to trap Jesus. We read it here in John chapter 8, verse 6 through 7. They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. I know we're all wondering, what did he write down? That's another question. Add it on the list. When you get to heaven, what did you write, Jesus? We probably won't even care then, right? But verse 7, they kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. How did Jesus respond? He did this. Jesus shifted the focus from her sin to their sins. The woman was not the only one caught in some kind of act that day. You see, that the woman was caught in the act of adultery. The religious leaders were caught in the act of judgment. Both acts would have been acts of sin. What Jesus was telling the accusers of this woman, he was telling them to practice what he preached on the Sermon on the Mount. Let me show it to you. We find it in Matthew chapter 7, starting verse 1. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. Pause. Are we allowed to judge or not judge? Reading that verse, that does not say you can't judge. Right? Those two verses. The first verse says, right? It says, do not judge others and you will not be judged. But then the next verse says, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. It's how you use it. It's how you walk through it. It's one thing to see an apple tree and say, that's an apple. You know what I'm saying? That's an apple on that apple tree. I just went to the orchard with my daughters, and we went and we got, what was it? I can't remember. They were red. But there's so many apples at this orchard, and we knew that this was the kind of apple we wanted to make pies for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so that's the area we went and got the apples from. Was I judging that apple tree for its apple only when I took a bite? Was it a good apple? We continue, and this helps because Jesus keeps going with this and says, and why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? See, when you focus on your sins, not other people's sins, this changes things, doesn't it? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of the speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. If we spent more time dealing with our own sins, more or rather than pointing out other people's sins, we would be more grace-filled towards others. We'd be more grace-filled towards others as they fail because we've all been there. We've all been there when we've been caught in the act of sin. We've all been there in a place desiring something more with our lives. We've all been there where we've struggled with something in our life. It may not be the same things that others struggle with, but we've struggled. And what if we gave people grace and we helped them find rescue? Because of Destiny Rescue's relentless pursuit of rescue and G's desire for a life of dignity and hope, she found a turning point. And it came when we were able to offer her rescue, and she bravely said yes to rescue. And she was enrolled into what we call a freedom plan. And so what I want you to know is that we have our survivors, and they take one of three steps with Destiny Rescue. They either enrolled into a Destiny Rescue freedom plan, their own personalized freedom plan, they're reunified with their family, or they're entrusted into a government agency or another like NGO, local organization. When it does come to freedom plans, when they come into our care, what they are provided is not just one or two things. In fact, when you look at that list, you're like, it's everything on that list. They're provided everything on that list. And even sometimes we will provide, like in G's case, we would provide food packs for her family back home as well, because we want to make sure that they are doing okay. So it's a safe bed. We just talked about the girl in Thailand. What's she using her bed for? Something other than sleep. But now she has a safe bed. There's the daily food, the urgent health. What are the health needs that they have when we find them? And we'll triage them and make sure that we take care of them health-wise. Economic empowerment. Their age dictates whether it's educational or vocational training. Because if they're younger, then they're going to get them back. We're going to get them back into school. But if it's like G, then we're going to give her vocational training. And then trauma resilience training is such a powerful piece to this. Learning about forgiveness and the power of forgiveness in your own life and in the life of others. And then spiritual growth. We want them to know Jesus. This great work only happens because of people like you and churches like yours. Like I said, Pastor Andy, you said we're the answer to prayer. You're our answer to our prayers. You have to choose to give today so children can choose to that dream of rescue and see it become a reality. G received support to help her heal from the trauma of her past and rebuild her self-esteem and rebuild her faith in God. Soon after, she was admitted into our skills training and she went into catering. It was actually an area she desired. She had always dreamt of pursuing this area. You know, the woman caught in adultery by those religious leaders probably wasn't dreaming about anything. She was probably hoping just to get out of the nightmare. She was probably just sitting there, huddled in a ball, wishing she could just escape the whole situation. So what happened next, she never would have imagined would become the outcome of her situation. We pick it back up in verse 8. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. Oh, again, Jesus, what did you write? Verse 9. When the accusers heard this, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. I checked the NIV translation real quick this morning because I was just like, before I said this, I was interested because in the NIV, it doesn't give you a sense that the crowd is still there. But here in the New Living Translation, it shows us they're not alone. The people who left were the accusers, the ones who could throw the stones first. The crowd is still there. And so what is heard next is not heard just by the woman who was caught in the act, but the crowd that remained. So those who were listening. So I believe it's not just for those who were listening, but it's for those who were reading. And I believe it's for those who are here right now to hear the same words that Jesus gave to the woman in that moment, which are these words right here. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." This is what I want us to take note of this encounter today. The woman was caught in the act of adultery. The religious leaders were caught in the act of judgment. Both were acts of sin. But Jesus was caught in the act of grace and rescue. That's what Jesus was caught in. See, Jesus had the authority to judge her. In fact, John 3:17 tells us that he didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world. Jesus had the authority to judge her. He also had the authority to forgive her, and he chose to forgive her rather than judge her. And Jesus chose to rescue her with grace when he said, "Neither do I. Now go and sin no more." Through Destiny Rescue, Jesus also rescued G with his grace. She embraced the opportunity of catering and that training with passion and discipline. And her talent blossomed quickly. And one of her proudest moments, this really hit me because we asked for G's story. When they gave us G's story included those of us who were there in Africa on that trip. Me and two other teammates. Because when we were there, we asked her, "Hey, could you bake us a cake?" Because she said she loved baking. And so she did. This is G, and this is her cake. And let me be clear, G knows how to bake. That is a delicious cake right there. And she made it, by the way, in Kiambu. It was more than just a cake. It was a powerful symbol of her new identity, of her talent and her hope for a better future. See, today, G's on a new journey. Today, G is with her catering skills. She's earning a living. She is paying her bills, and she's caring for her baby boy. And her dreams are one day to actually own her own catering business, so that when she can not only just provide for her family, but she also can inspire other girls in her community, in Kiambu, to choose a path of dignity over exploitation. G experienced the same grace from Jesus that the woman in John chapter 8 experienced. And grace, did you know, is really just a type of rescue. Let me take a quick moment and get a little Greek action for you, because I know that Pastor Andy likes to do a little of that. I've watched online services and stuff, so I've been paying attention. So I'm going to throw a little Greek at you, and I'll either do it well or not. I know there's like a Bible teacher in here or something, a professor or something like that. Yeah, so it's okay. So we'll see how well I do. All right, here we go. In Greek, the Greek word for grace is charis, which refers to an unmerited gift and favor. Right? So hold that. Rescue in Greek is two words, sozo and ruomai. Sozo is a verb that has a broad meaning encompassing saving from physical danger, rescuing, healing, and making someone whole. Hold that. It's frequently used in the New Testament to describe spiritual salvation, but also carries the sense of deliverance from peril. Ruomai is a verb that specifically implies rescuing or delivering someone from danger or evil. It also can mean to draw to oneself, suggesting a protective action, pulling something out of a perilous situation. Jesus bestowed on the woman an unmerited gift of favor and kindness, and Jesus pulled her out of a perilous situation, finishing it all by making her whole when he said, "Go and sin no more." Jesus did the same for G. He does the same for you and me. He wants us to be caught in the act of grace and rescue. So here's my question. What act would you and I be best known for? If there was a poll done by those that are around you daily, what act would they say you are best known for? Would it be an act that, what act would you get caught in? Would it be the act of sin? Not necessarily committing adultery, but would it be an act of sin of adultery, commitment, or anything else like that? Or would it be an act of Jesus? An act of grace? An act of rescue? Maybe you're here today, and you feel like the woman. You feel like a less than because of your own acts. Because of your own acts of sin. I want you to know that Jesus offers you grace and rescue today. Maybe you realize you are much like the religious or other accusers, and you look down on others as if you are better than they are. The good news is Jesus is offering you grace and rescue too. And maybe you feel like the crowd that was present. Maybe you have your own sin you have left unchecked, and it is not as advertised as sins like adultery and judgment. But you need to be freed. Jesus is offering you grace and rescue today. So I ask, is that you today? Jesus is here to offer rescue from your situation and to make you whole. I think communion's a perfect moment for you to ask that question. And I'll let Pastor Andy handle any kind of response to that. But my suggestion is during communion, if you need grace and rescue, ask for it. And Jesus will give it, no matter who you are. So let's be like Jesus. Let's get caught in the act of grace and rescue. And the good news is we can jump in right now. We can do it right now because $1,500 is the cost it requires for us to equip a girl or equip them with a path to freedom. $1,500 is the average cost for a rescue, and that's a rescue to freedom, the whole path. It is not just rescuing, it's the journey. The whole thing, $1,500. It sets girls like G free, and they're no longer trapped in the darkness of exploitation, human trafficking. $1,500 is every rescue. And I've shared this before, and I'm grateful for Wayne and Cecilia because I came to know some of these details because of questions they had at that dinner at Chit Chat Diner. Every dollar today that goes towards rescuing a child, every dollar goes to rescue. You can look at our financial picture as an organization. You'll see how much we give, or how much per dollar and all that. But when it comes to rescue a child, when it comes to a Rescue Sunday, and you give to rescue a child, every single dollar goes to rescue. And not just that, but yesterday we just launched a campaign because of generous donors around this country. We launched a campaign to match dollar for dollar right now until we can get $500,000. We had generous donors give, all these donors come together and they gave $500,000. And they're saying, we want to match it. That means that what happens is you get to empower the choice that G made to say yes to rescue. You get to empower others' rescues, and it will double rescues. It will double freedom. It will double life change. It can happen today. You can use that QR code. I will make sure if you give through the church, they just need to make sure they just put match on the memo line, and we've got it good. But I want to ask you a question. Or actually, maybe this is a question you're asking as you think about G's story and maybe others, maybe even other things going on, is why? Why do we become born to and live in a place where we live, where other people live in a place of greater poverty? And I want to end by just thinking this question through and realizing I don't think God answers the question why. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? What is the why? Instead of asking why, would you learn to ask 3 other questions? Because I think these are the questions that God is asking you to ask instead of why. What, how, and who? What does God want me to do with what I've been given? In some situations, it might be God's given me more time. Sometimes it'd be God's given me a talent. God has given me treasure. Pastor Andy was doing sound, and you're right here, Pastor Andy, and I was expecting you right there. So I don't know if someone used their talent to do it, or you're just really gifted and you can do from there because you have your iPad or something like that. Maybe that, anyways, I don't know. But Pastor Andy was doing sound this morning, and I know there are people here who have a talent that they can give to their church so that their pastor is not doing sound someday. Even if it's a good reason. I could go on that. Time, talent, but then also treasure. What are you going to do with the treasure you've been given? What does God want me to do with what I've been given? How can I make a difference? And who does God want me to make a difference for? We are God's channels for his resources to flow to those he wants us to rescue. When we do this, it changes everything. I'm going to end with a video. And this video that I want you to watch, it talks about training makes rescue possible. And you're going to see primarily training that happens in Kenya, but it might be in other places in Africa, but you'll see primarily there. And you'll see some catering. You'll see people baking or doing other things. This is where G did her training. And so I've told Pastor Andy, I scoured the video to see if G was in it. And I don't think she is. Because this video was made about the time she was rescued. And so I just want you to watch it and see. You can just see the smiles. You saw the smiles on G's face, right? You see the smiles on these girls' faces. And because of you saying yes to rescue, they've been able to say yes to freedom themselves. So please watch.